So, ladies and gentlemen, we have our keynote speaker from United States, correct? Andrew, do you hear us?
Andrew, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So, Andrew Levine, he's the renowned head of communication and advocacy at Steemit. Steemit at who knows, blockchain social media, goals. So, Andrew will be speaking about the topic is the derived state, the next wave of blockchain innovation. So, Andrew, we are ready, and please start your speech.
All right. So I'm going to get started talking about derived state right now. Maybe derived state wasn't the right name. It's a very boring sounding concept. But I think if I give you all a little background about what we have done at Steemit with both the Steem Blockchain and then Steemit.com, it will help you understand why I think that this is the future of the space and why you can really only appreciate where the space is going if you understand the problems that actual blockchain applications are having. One of the unique things that we have at Steemit is that because we have an actual application that tens of thousands of people use every single day in Steemit.com, we have to solve problems that nobody else in this space is solving. And so what you see very frequently in the space is that because people are constrained by the platforms that they've chosen to adopt, whether it's Ethereum, Bitcoin, or EOS, those initial constraints that they commit themselves to wind up preventing them from launching real applications that people use. And because people don't actually use their applications, the people behind the platforms and behind the protocols that are powering these applications, which no one uses, they're forced to kind of make up problems that and solve those problems that they're imagining developers may one day have, as opposed to solving problems that developers are having today, because they don't really have real applications. And I know that sounds like a bold statement, but if you actually look at user activity on any other blockchain protocol, you see that it's very few people. It's dozens of people a day using things like Ethereum applications or even EOS applications, aside from gambling applications. But I am personally extremely skeptical about how much usage gambling applications are actually getting, because it's extremely easy to fake user activity on a gambling application, because gambling applications are effectively programmatic applications anyway. It's extremely easy to design robots that play game applications. And if you're a game application developer and you want to trick people into thinking actual people use your app, it's very easy to develop a bot that does that. So with all that aside, let me talk a little bit about the Steem blockchain and Steemit.com. The Steem blockchain was originally launched because we wanted to build a blockchain that could support real applications. And we took Reddit as kind of a example of the type of application we wanted to build. And so we worked backwards from how do you build a web application on top of a blockchain, as opposed to what most other projects did, which is they said, we want to build a blockchain that is capable of performing computations, and then we'll figure out how to build applications on it. Instead, we said, let's build we want to build Reddit.com, a competitor to Reddit.com, and we'll build a blockchain that enables us to do it, and then all of the additional tools that enable us to do that. And so within just a few months, maybe 3 or 4 months, the founding team of Steemit released the Steem Blockchain and Steemit.com. And so Steem was designed to be extremely simple. It wasn't designed to be a computation platform. It was designed to host the specific smart contracts necessary to support web applications. So things like human readable account names, the ability to send and receive tokens, our unique proof of brain algorithm, which enables the users of an application to distribute tokens based on voting behaviors. And so instead of saying we want to enable developers to do anything they want on our blockchain, which would make it really complicated, which would consume a lot of resources, and make the whole thing very expensive and make it very difficult to offer a free to use blockchain, what we did is we said, let's make a very narrowly constrained blockchain with a very limited set of operations. And this would enable us to allow users to use the blockchain for free, so have a free to use blockchain, and it would enable us to launch a blockchain that was very fast with 3-second block times. And so we did that, and not only did Steemit.com grow very rapidly, and it's still a very widely used application, still the biggest social application on a blockchain, but what started to happen was other developers said, hey, I can use this blockchain for other things too. And in the process of developing Steemit.com, one of the things we discovered was that, so it's important to remember that originally, and up until about a year ago, Steemit.com was a front-end user interface that was powered by a blockchain. The back-end database for Steemit.com was a C++ database that was decentralized. And so every time we wanted to add features to Steemit.com, even very simple features, we had to make changes to the blockchain, which required a hard fork, which required getting consensus among all the block producers. But many of these changes, like I said, were very small. And so this is kind of where derived state comes in. So the original example that kind of started this whole movement, or this whole like aha moment, was a very small change that probably nobody noticed or nobody even understands. And it was the reputation score on Steemit.com. Originally, actually, the Steem blockchain has no reputation score built into it. Instead, the way that we calculate the reputation score is we use a user's Steem stake, how much of the token they have vested or illiquid in their account. And then we combine that with how many people follow them. And so it's a very simple algorithm. And that algorithm is posted to the Steem blockchain, but it is not actually computed by the blockchain. So this is the first iconic example of derived state, where you take two values that are in state. They are part of consensus. They are executed by the decentralized network of computers, that being the stake that a user has and the number of followers that they have. But then we take those two values that are in state and we plug them into an algorithm that's on chain, but we execute that algorithm off-chain, basically in the front end. So the front end is reading these two values, aggregating them into a single value and showing that to the user. And now when reputation is one of, we didn't even really think this through. We just thought a reputation score would be a good idea. But very quickly, people started competing to get their reputation scores up. Reputation became one of the most innovative features on Steemit.com. And it's important to remember that reputation does not exist in consensus. It's derived state. And the nice thing, the beauty of derived state is that it combines the trustlessness of consensus, of state, with the flexibility of totally off-chain computation. We could change the reputation score whenever we want by just changing that algorithm that's on chain. And so another way that I think about this is that it's trust through validation versus trust through decentralized computing. Anybody can look at that algorithm, at the reputation algorithm, and compute it themselves to validate that we are showing the right reputation score. And so we get trust that way. Like, you can trust our score, or you can check it for yourself. And if somebody really wants to, they could actually design a tool that trustlessly computes the reputation score. But reputation score is a very low risk computation, right? It has nothing to do with tokens or anything like that. And so everybody is perfectly fine with us computing the reputation score for them. And this enables us to add more features more rapidly. And the critical distinction, if you're wondering why we're only really coming to this realization now, it's because two things were kind of missing before. One is derived state only works if you have an existing decentralized blockchain platform beneath it. So you need something like Steem or Ethereum or Bitcoin in order to have derived state, because you have to have that base layer that is totally trustless, where you can put additional information or code. The second thing, and this is really where Steem stands out, because this isn't an entirely new concept. People were talking about storing code on Bitcoin a long time ago. But the problem with Bitcoin is that it takes 10 minutes for blocks to be produced, and there are fees associated with every transaction. And so when you're talking about derived state, read-write speeds become very important. And so this is where Steem shines, because you have 3-second effectively read-write speeds. You can read and write to the blockchain in 3 seconds. So even if you're just storing code on the blockchain, you could do it in near real time. And then even more importantly is that each time you write to the blockchain, you're not being charged a fee. And so that is really a quantum leap in terms of derived state, because any fee, if it's gas on Ethereum, is going to be a huge bottleneck for users and developers as far as storing code on a blockchain. So it really has to be extremely fast and extremely feeless. But at that point, once you have a fast and feeless blockchain, the possibilities really become endless. And so another blockchain that kind of highlights this situation is EOS. And EOS is also very fast, and it's also feeless. But the problem, and it could be used in this way. However, the problem with EOS, or one of the problems with EOS, aside from the fact that they haven't solved the problem of reliability yet, which we have. Steem never gets congested. It never slows down. It never stops the user experience is very consistent due to an innovation we pioneered called resource credits. But the other thing is that because EOS is a general purpose platform, the amount of demand on the network is highly variable, and the cost of CPU and RAM is fluctuating all of the time. And so it really doesn't act as a consistent and low cost means of storing your code and your information and powering your applications because of this variability and a few other important details that make running an application on EOS, whether very costly. It is insanely expensive to run an application on EOS. What people don't realize is that the EOS blockchain is stored entirely in RAM, and it's huge. Last time I checked, it was 8 terabytes. And so if you're running an application and if you're going to want to run a node, it's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars a month, at least, probably way more, just to run the node, because the blockchain is stored in RAM, the most expensive memory possible. And this is why it was so important for us to move our blockchain out of RAM into commodity hardware. And so now the cost of running a Steem node, if you want to, you can always just access our nodes through our API, is extremely low cost. And as our chain grows, the cost of our hardware declines. So your cost of running a node is not going to go up. And so where we find ourselves is that we have a very, very low cost blockchain that is basically optimized for web applications, for being very simple, and for derived state, for enabling you to store your code on a blockchain at very, very low cost, write that code to the blockchain very, very fast, and for free, and then use that code to power your decentralized application. And this is code written in JavaScript. So whereas the blockchain is in C++, so you get the reliability and the robustness of C++, and you also get the reliability and robustness of our blockchain developers who are great, right? You don't want to be writing smart contracts, right? There are only 2 types of developers: people who can write smart contracts and they're right, and people who believe they can write smart contracts and they're wrong. Most people who believe they can write smart contracts that are bug-free are either delusional or liars. And so with our blockchain, you get the best of both worlds. You get this rock-solid, limited blockchain so that we really focus on making sure that it's incredibly robust, that bugs are identified and resolved as quickly as possible, and that bugs can't be introduced by outside developers. And then you gain this ability to add code in the form of JavaScript to the blockchain and use that additional code to offer a wider variety of features to your application. So that's my view of derived state. I believe that applications going forward, the successful ones, are going to rely primarily on derived state for their features. I think that it enables you to iterate your application much, much faster, develop features on par with existing web applications like Facebook and Twitter and all of that, while still enabling you to tap into the core set of blockchain features that people actually want, which are fairly limited. Things like transferring tokens, things like earning non-fungible tokens as in-game items. There's a very limited set of features that require a blockchain. There's a far wider variety of features that can benefit from the code being on a blockchain. And it's about the interaction of these 2 layers first and second layer that are really going to define the next wave of innovation. And I strongly believe that Steem is going to be leading the direction there because it's unrivaled in terms of its speed and its low cost. So I hope you all found this very interesting. I don't know if there's a way for you guys to ask me any questions, but that's about all I have to say about Steemit, Steem, and Derived State.
Thank you, Andrew Levine from Steemit. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
now
you.
I will ask the audience if we have any questions. Do we have any questions? Good. We got 2 ones. If you want to ask in English, please ask in English.
Andrew, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
my
you.
name is
Try to
Katrina.
speak clearly, though.
I'm a co-founder of Cooperage. We're a social trading platform, and like Steemit, we're going to design the EOS blockchain in our system. What would be your major advice for developing such system for co-founders going on collaboration with EOS funding bodies? Like, can you tell us more how the process is built, how you communicate with them, how you got the funding for that?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're asking me how you can get funding for your EOS application?
How did you get it?
Okay, we're not built on the EOS blockchain. Okay, I'll do my best to answer the question I think you should be asking. I'll tell you about our history. We launched our own blockchain. Dan Larimer, the architect of EOS, before he launched EOS, he launched Steem. And so we launched our own blockchain, and we accumulated a large stake in that blockchain. And then by releasing an application that people loved and wanted to use, that drove speculative interest in our token. And so that's how we acquired funding. I would say that you can do a certain version of this with EOS, where you build your application, you launch a token on EOS, and then because your application is so great, people want to accumulate your token because it's somehow tied to your platform. Now, it's not very likely that you're going to be able to successfully build your application on EOS, or that you'll be able to launch a token on EOS and get people to buy it and get interested in it. It's incredibly difficult to work with EOS. It's a C++ blockchain. So not only do you have to have amazing C++ developers, but they actually have to be really good at writing C++ smart contracts. And then you're going to have front-end developers who are capable of building a front-end application that can tie into a C++ database as its back end. That's basically impossible. So what we're offering with the Steem blockchain is we currently have something called smart media tokens on testnet. And smart media tokens will enable you to launch your own Steem-like token with 3-second feeless transfers and proof of brain at extremely low cost. And so your developers can begin experimenting with this today on our testnet. And this really highlights why EOS is a terrible choice for an application, because you're going to have to design the token and the token economics all on your own. Whereas smart media tokens, we actually launched our wizard already, which means that there is a front end where anyone, not a developer, can go in and design their token, and it'll actually launch on the testnet through our user interface. And not only that, because we have so much experience with proof of brain, proof of brain is the solution to how do you get your users invested into your token, and how do you get your users to advocate for the use of your token, because it has all of the smart contracts necessary to enable your token to be distributed based on the votes of your users. And so what that means is that it's really designed for web applications that want to tie a token into their actual application. So you can focus on designing your front end. You launch your token, and then your users do the work of distributing a percentage of it amongst themselves to the people who are doing the most to add value. And that's a better way to bootstrap your token.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. We have got the last question, or we have some remarks. No? The last question's for you.
Hi Andrew, my name is Dmitry, I'm a business analyst. Could you please give us a small remark on how exactly did you pull off to make your platform decentralized and with free transactions?
More information on how we made our platform decentralized, and what was the last part?
It seems to me you mentioned free transactions like in EOS.
Yes, free transactions. Well, so free transactions are done by, there's no such thing as free. So it fundamentally comes down to having the network subsidize the transaction somehow. Actually, in the Steem white paper, there is a good explanation for how you get free transactions. And it's basically a good example, a good way to think about it is, say you do 2 transactions on Ethereum in a year, and they charge you $10 for both of those transactions, right? That costs you $20 in fees. Now, say you have purchased $100 worth of ETH and you have it sitting in your account. Now, the transactions themselves on even the most decentralized, expensive network like Ethereum or Bitcoin, the transactions themselves do not actually cost the network very much. The majority of the cost in a transaction is to prevent attacks. That's a very important point. The majority of the cost in any fee for a transaction is not for the cost of the transaction to the network, it's to prevent attacks on the network. The cost has to be sufficiently high so that people can't attack the network and congest it and use it up. So the way around that is to say, well, look, if we were going to charge a user $20 to perform a couple of transactions over the course of a year, why don't we just require that they hold, say, $100 in their account? And then as long as they're holding that, we basically enable them to transact for free. And so that's the core at the innovation behind both EOS and Steem, is just algorithms that ensure that as long as you have enough of the token in your wallet, you're allowed to transact for free. So the way I like to highlight this distinction is that it's the difference between pay to play and stake to play or invest to play. So instead of requiring that people pay to play this game of using these blockchains, you require that they invest in the blockchain to pay. Now, one of the things that Steem has benefits from that EOS doesn't have. Now these are different platforms trying to solve different problems. I don't want to get bogged down in which is better, but one of the reasons we could have added smart contracts to Steem, and actually this is part of what caused the rift between Steem, our team, and Dan Larimer, is that we believe that it was important to keep the smart contract on Steem very limited and to not allow developers to just inject whatever code they want into the code base. And the reason for that was that it would increase the cost of running the network. It would make the protocol more complex, which would make it more difficult to accurately price transactions and ensure that as many users as possible would be able to have a free and low cost and positive user experience on our platform. And that's why Steem is still way, way, way better for powering web applications than EOS. And I promise you, if you take a look at both protocols, an unbiased view, as opposed to, well, I'm going to pick the protocol where I think I'm going to get the most short-term money. I think Block 1 is going to give me $1 billion. They're not, by the way. You're not going to get money just because you build on EOS. If you look at an unbiased view of how am I going to build the greatest application, because that's how you're going to make the most money, is by building a great application with a great user experience. Steem is going to win every time.
Andrea, thank you very much. We have got it. This loud round of applause is coming to you. Thank you for contributing to Kyiv Blockchain Forum. Looking forward to have you as a speaker on the next events, and have a good day, man. You're awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.